The hall thundered with applause as young graduates in colorful gowns tossed their caps into the air, laughter echoing against the high ceilings. Families surged forward with cameras, arms open for hugs, and voices raised in celebration. But at the far end of the hall, a young woman sat quietly, her tassel untouched. Her name was Elena. She clutched her diploma tightly, but her hands trembled as her eyes searched for someone who would never arrive. Her father should have been there, sitting proudly in the audience, smiling through his tired eyes. For years, he had risen before the sun, his hands blistered from farm work, his back bent under the weight of sacrifice. Every coin he earned was carefully tucked away for her education, every dream of his own quietly folded into hers. But the night before her graduation, exhaustion finally claimed him. He passed away alone in their small home, leaving Elena with both the gift of her future and the grief of his absence. The crowd roared, flashes lit the hall, names were called in triumph, but Elena's world was silent. She stared at the empty chair where her father should have been, a hollow ache swallowing the joy of the day. She wanted to scream, to beg the universe for one more moment, one more smile, one more whisper of, "I'm proud of you." But all she could do was whisper softly, "This is yours, Papa." As her classmates celebrated, Elena's tears spilled quietly down her cheeks. In that moment, she understood something profound. History did not only steal nations, it stole the stories of people like her father. Men and women who gave everything, yet stood unseen, their legacy hidden in silence. And so, her journey began. Weeks drifted by like slow-moving clouds, heavy with unanswered questions. Elena walked through her small town with her notebook pressed to her chest, her heart searching for meaning in faces she had once overlooked. She noticed things she had never paused to see before. The janitor at her old school, bent over his mop with tired shoulders, yet humming a soft tune to keep his spirit alive. The waitress at the diner who smiled brightly at strangers though her swollen feet ached beneath the counter. The gardener trimming roses in the park, pausing to breathe in the scent before leaving beauty behind for others to admire. Each of them reminded her of her father. His cracked hands, his quiet sacrifices, his pride hidden beneath silence. And suddenly, Elena realized a painful truth. The world had been celebrating the powerful while forgetting the people who quietly carried its weight. History books were filled with names of conquerors, politicians, and wealthy men, but nowhere did she find the story of her father, or the countless invisible souls who had built the foundation of dreams with no monuments to their names. One evening, Elena sat alone in the library. She opened a thick history book, its pages yellowed with time. The words told of battles, speeches, and treaties, but not of the mothers who worked double shifts to feed their children, or the veterans who returned home to empty hands. She ran her fingers over the page, her voice breaking into a whisper, "I will not let your names be erased." That night, under the faint glow of a desk lamp, Elena began writing. Line by line, she poured stories into her notebook. They weren't about power or fame, they were about kindness, sacrifice, and quiet, forgotten courage. She didn't yet know her words would one day echo beyond her own grief. Months later, Elena found herself in a crowded train station, her precious notebook clutched to her chest. By now, its pages were filled with stories, stories of janitors, waitresses, gardeners, farmers, ordinary people whose sacrifices painted the true colors of history. She was on her way to a small community event, where she had been invited to read aloud for the first time. Her father's memory would finally breathe beyond her heart. But fate had other plans. As the train roared into the station, the crowd surged forward. Elena stumbled, the notebook slipping from her hands. In an instant, hundreds of handwritten pages scattered across the floor like autumn leaves in a storm. Commuters rushed past, stepping over them without noticing. Someone barked impatiently, "Move aside." Another man in a sharp suit muttered, "Kids these days, careless." Her face burned with shame as she dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather the pages, her tears smudging the ink. It felt cruelly familiar, her father's legacy, trampled once again, ignored by the world in its hurry. She clutched a torn page, ready to give up, until a small voice rose above the noise. A boy had stopped. He picked up a sheet and began reading aloud, "My father gave away his only coat to a stranger one winter. He came home shivering, but smiling." The station hushed. One by one, people froze. The man in the suit bent down, silently handing her another page. A woman knelt to gather more. Soon, dozens of strangers were helping, not just to return the papers, but to honor the words written on them. Elena stood slowly, notebook pieced back together, her heart trembling. For the first time, her father's story wasn't invisible. It had reached others, and it had moved them. The night of the community event arrived, and Elena walked nervously into the hall. She expected only a handful of neighbors, maybe a few curious listeners. Instead, the room was overflowing, old men leaning on canes, young mothers with children on their laps, students still in school uniforms. People had heard about the girl with the notebook, the one who carried stories of forgotten lives. Elena's hands shook as she opened the notebook. She began softly, her voice unsteady, but the room leaned in. She spoke of a janitor who worked unseen for 30 years, a nurse who comforted the dying with her own lullabies, a farmer who gave his last meal away and returned home hungry. As her words filled the hall, silence wrapped around the listeners. Tears glistened in strangers' eyes. When she finished, a frail man with silver hair stood slowly from the back row. He shuffled toward her, his eyes brimming. "Your father," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I knew him. We worked together in the fields. One winter night, I was starving. He gave me his own food and went without. That kindness saved me. I never forgot." Elena froze, her throat tightening. "You knew my father?" she asked, tears spilling freely. The man nodded, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a faded photograph, edges worn from decades of touch. In it, her father stood smiling beside workers, arm draped across their shoulders, eyes full of warmth. Elena's chest heaved as she held the photo to her heart. For so long, she feared his story had been erased. But here, in the trembling hands of another soul he had once saved, his memory was alive. Grief melted into honor. Her father had not been forgotten. Years later, Elena stood behind a podium in a grand auditorium. The once shy girl who whispered to her father's empty chair was now an author, a voice for those history had overlooked. Behind her hung a banner that read, "The History of America, Through Its People." Her little notebook had become a published book. That book had grown into a movement. Schools, libraries, and communities now gathered to hear stories not of conquerors or generals, but of everyday men and women, the quiet builders of hope. Elena adjusted the microphone, her heart swelling as she gazed at the sea of faces before her. Students, elders, workers, families, all waiting to hear voices that once went unheard. She began reading passages of kindness exchanged on cold nights, of sacrifices made in silence, of mothers who skipped meals so their children could eat. With every story, the room grew stiller, until even the sound of breath felt sacred. As she closed her speech, Elena paused. Tears welled, but her voice was steady. She repeated her father's words, the ones he had spoken when she was a little girl, "We may not own the land, but we leave behind the love that grows from it. The hall erupted in a standing ovation, the sound rolling like thunder, filling the space with warmth. Elena smiled through tears, her gaze drifting upward. For the first time, she felt the weight in her chest lift, not because the pain was gone, but because it had found purpose. Her father's sacrifice had blossomed into something eternal. History hadn't just stolen, it had also given her a chance to return what was lost. And in that moment, the once empty chair in her heart felt full.